this is more the tradition of the birds of a feather for the more open Q&A and discussion around any issues that you as part of the community might have as around or surrounding ACES and ACES adoption in visual effects pipelines.
Can I ask a question to Kevin?
Of course.
If I understood well, at Framestore, every show is ACES now, right?
Yeah, not strictly true. There's a very long time frame on some of our shows. So every show that started after the beginning of April is ACES internally. There were some shows that were ACES CG internally, but we still do have one or two that are running from 2.5 years ago that we started them, and so we don't tend to change anything once we start down a path. We keep going for that show all the way to the end. So yeah, but at the moment everything, and the future plan is that everything in visual effects for film will be done ACES. Okay. We only have one ACES job in our commercial arm, which is for long form TV for an internet service.
Okay, so my question is, how do you deal with what the client is sending you? For example, if the client is not sending you any ACES stuff or any camera row and is sending you actually a color package with some lookup table that are not very workable, you are unlikely to have internally a pipeline that is too different from what the client is going to see. So how do we handle that right now?
Pretty much the same as Robert does with OCIO and a bundle of transformations hidden behind options for the artists. They just pick, we have actually two lookup tables that we tend to use. We have the kind of fairly standard ARRI sort of look as a kind of default starting point, and we also have whatever the DI house is supplying us. And so we've only seen one job with the full RRT. And whenever we got that, actually, people had the opposite problem, that they thought it was too contrasty, actually. So and we hide all of that behind OCIO choices. So they're just basically picking from a very short list, hopefully. And okay. Yeah, lots of conversions in between, all concatenated, hopefully.
Yeah, Jonathan, there's a microphone.
Have any of your facilities done a widespread conversion of old texture assets to ACES CG?
I would say I think one of the things we've predominantly done is to do neutral or equal value preserving color space transformations for D65, so that we don't tend to get too many artists grumbling that my equal values no longer look gray, because they assume that that's what that means.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jeffrey Weekley. I'm at the University of California in Merced. I design cyber infrastructure to support high data rate applications. And so I was wondering, and John, you alluded to it, but maybe somebody else could comment on how the decomplexifying of your workflows has impacted the infrastructure that you have to support. The servers, the network, the workstations. Has it had a positive impact, or has it, made a difference?
So the data size of things is kind of irrelevant from the ingest point of view. So basically when we bring everything in and we convert it, we've made a copy, effectively, but that's really nothing compared to everything else that we do. And I don't even think anybody would notice if we did it a few times, because, as soon as you have a FX render or something, that's like more than everything you've ingested.
Apparently there's several reasons to use D65 as the white point for the ACES CG color space. So I'm curious what the original rationale was for choosing D60.
Ray, did you have? So now that we've talked about all the practical reasons as to what the D60 implications are, the actual, if you cast your mind way back 12 years ago, the actual real reason we ended up at D60 was, the world was split between D55 and film-based work and D65. And if we went with either one of those, in particular D65, it would require a color appearance model to actually transfer in between. With D60, we could come into D60 from D65, and we could get there from the legacy film world of D55 without having to do a color appearance transform in between. And if you think just getting the vendors to deal with negative numbers was really, really going to be hard, trying to get them to add a color appearance model as part of this, we felt was a bridge too far. And because of the way it's been explained here, we worked very hard to make sure that you could get any creative white point out that you want. And the D60 doesn't have to be the appearance of what you're dealing with. It merely has to be accounted for in your pipeline. But what's come up today is a couple of extremely valid reasons to have D65 ODTs, not the least of which is to be able to compare a creative reference that you go out and look at on the web and do other aspects. So most of the arguments about D60 and workflow were built around the fact that you could create and get any master you want and do the final output. But now, a decade later, while we're looking at the actual day-to-day implementation impact for artists, adding D65 could be extremely valuable, but it's not a panacea to eliminate having to actually think about your white point.
Excellent. Any last questions? We have maybe time for one more. Ray?
One of the things, this has been extremely helpful, birds of a feather for those of us trying to actually figure out, you know, how this project can complete some of the little leftover bits and pieces that need to get done. But I just want to point out that as has been discussed, the going to wider gamuts and the changes that are actually happening out there in the industry, regardless of ACES, has created a problem around negative number handling. And ACES sometimes gets blamed for that because as people are abandoning an old workflow and going to something new, they look around and here's a standard and here's this and why am I having these troubles? And fundamentally, as has been mentioned numerous times in the panel, getting proper support in the tools from the suppliers to our industry is absolutely critical. There are a certain number of people who listen to the Academy, and there's a lot of people building tools for our industry who have responded to that call for action. But we're one voice. And in a lot of these places, they go, we need lots of people asking for something before we can justify getting it put into the R&D cycle. So even though many of us in this room respect the stature of the Academy, in order to get what we need in these broader general tools, I would encourage everybody here to be asking your suppliers and be asking your vendors for proper ACES support. And in particular, the weakest area right now is the handling of negative numbers. And as has been pointed out, it's critical. It has to be done. If they don't do it, you have to do it in your facility. You'll have to do it whether you're using ACES or not. The call for action from my perspective to you guys is to try to let the vendors know that you're doing what you can to move to an ACES workflow. There is real value there. It's going to be important to the industry, and we would really like to see them step up their game with regard to adding support. It's not around adding support that's ACES. It's about adding support for the industry as it's evolved to these new set of needs and new deliverables, and it needs to be there no matter what. So that was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. And thank you, everybody. We have to wrap up because the room is booked for the next session. After Siggraph, please log on to acescentral.com and register and use that as your platform. Thank you all for coming and for the great discussion, and have a good Siggraph.
Sweet.